book friends, welcome back to another episode of Most Bookish. I am your host, Amanda, and we are talking all things books, book review, book analysis, books. Sit. That's what you want. That's what you're looking for. You're in the right place. Before we get started, like this. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that you haven't seen it. You're going to like it. You know it. I know it. Even if you don't, we're still going to give it a thumbs up because we're friends. Thank you. And subscribe wherever I put the thing. Subscribe. Please and thank you. I'm going to say it lots of times in this video. I'm going to remember. Yay! So, welcome back. I hope that you've been having a great holiday season and you are ready to talk about the next book, or in this case, books, plural, because we are actually going to be talking about two memoirs. I feel like this is the season of the memoir. I don't know if it's because of the end of the year. It seems like towards the end of the year and the beginning of the year, there are a lot of memoir releases. Maybe I'm imagining that. I don't know. But lots of Merry Christmas. Maybe buy this for Christmas? Do we buy memoirs for Christmas? Do we buy people books for Christmas? Yes. Book people who buy them books. Actually, most people buy me gift cards because books are so particular. It's very dangerous to buy somebody who reads a book if you don't know them incredibly well and you don't know exactly what book they would want, or if they didn't give you a list of books that you could buy. Other than that, I think it's very similar to buying somebody perfume, or at least to buying me perfume, because I'm very particular about my perfume. You're taking a risk. You're rolling a dice, and I might have to regift it. I mean, somebody else will appreciate it. So today we are talking about two memoirs, one that came out earlier this year and one that came out very recently, and that is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, which was highly anticipated ever since she was released from her conservatorship. Everybody has been waiting for her version of the story, and I don't know if everybody necessarily knew what form it would take. I think that maybe they thought she would do an interview. Instead, she wrote a memoir that wasn't too long. It was about 5.5 hours if you listen to it on audiobook, which I did. Both of these memoirs are audiobooks that I listened to. It was about 5.5 hours. She did a very short introduction, but she was not the narrator for the story. However, the narrator for the story, Michelle Williams, not Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child, Michelle Williams, the actress of originally Dawson's Creek fame, and after that, so many great movies that she's been nominated for different awards, Brokeback Mountain, etc., etc. And she does a phenomenal job with it. I don't think an appreciable difference that Britney's didn't tell it. I personally always love it when the authors retell their story, but in this particular circumstance, I think that it went really, really well. The other memoir is Paris Hilton's memoir that was released this year that I don't think as many people, or really any, were anticipating to come out. We didn't realize that she was going to release a memoir, especially not the kind that she did. It's called The Memoir, and she narrates her memoir herself. It's very Paris Hilton. It's very well written. She does a great job reading it, and they're both stylistically different, but they're actually surprisingly talking about very similar circumstances for young women in their lives during the time that they were very well known. My cup matches my shirt and my makeup. First part is going to be talking about Miss Spears' story, and then we're going to get into Miss Hilton's story, and then we're going to do a bit of cross mingling, if you will, to talk about some of the themes that live inside both of those very interesting behind the scenes looks at two young women who, for all intents and purposes, a lot of us who were young at that time thought that we knew, or thought that we knew what the story was. And according to their memoirs and according to what they say, we didn't. So the setting for Britney Spears' memoir is, for the most part, in the South in the beginning. She grew up in Louisiana, or parts of Louisiana, and she was very much a Southern girl. Her family history is mostly in the South at that time. Prior to that, she had a glamorous grandmother who was British. Her mother's mother was part British. She had actually come from a lot of money and fallen in love with an American, relocated to the South, and ended up spending her life on a dairy farm, which was very different than what she had been used to. This kind of habit of choosing the wrong men, or men that lead to a far different circumstance than what they are used to, to is something that the women in her family have repeated for a few generations, because then her mother, who also comes from a more well-kept situation, falls in love with her father, Jamie, who has grown up with an abusive father for his entire life, and it's led to some emotional issues that contribute to his alcoholism eventually in his life. And it's something that Britney's mother and them as a family have to deal with for many years after Jamie, her father, and Lynn, her mother, have married and started having kids in a family. Her brother's the oldest, she's the middle, and Jamie Lynn is the little sister that comes later. Brittany, grows up very close to her brother for a lot of years. They run around in the woods of Louisiana and have a lot of freedom as children. There's a lot of stories of them in nature. She spends a lot of time with her grandparents, primarily her grandmothers, who she loves very much. One of them is a step grandmother because her father's mother had committed suicide a long time before. That is also a running theme in the stories: mental illness. Her grandmother, her paternal grandmother, suffered from mental illness after losing a child, and she was put in an asylum by her husband, Brittany's grandfather, who, for all intents and purposes, was a very bad man. By the time Brittany comes around, he's older and he's a nice grandpa as she knows him. She does tell the truth about his past. And I feel like so often with abusers, that happens when they get older. It's like, oh, little old man. And you feel so bad about how fragile and powerless they are that you forget the terror that they inflicted upon their loved ones for many years and just see them in this new iteration. I guess some people could say that there's forgiveness or redemption at some point in somebody's life, but I don't know if they would be searching for forgiveness or redemption if they were still as powerful and capable as they had been at the height of their years of abuse. So moving along, he also institutionalized a couple of other wives, which kind of sets the blueprint for what Brittany's father is going to eventually do to her, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So she grows up in Louisiana, very southern, very backyard barbecue, all family members around each other, very happy and simple little girl, outside of the fact that her father is an alcoholic, and their financial situation, along with the constant fighting with her mother and father because of his alcoholism, him disappearing, all of those things keep her stressed out on a regular basis. She has some feelings of ambivalence towards her mother when she's young about how much she gives her father a hard time and fights with him. I think in the midst of the craziness of how she lives, she just wishes that her mom would stop making it worse. This kind of idea of her mom not helping the situation, or her having, I think, a bit more resentment towards her mother because maybe she feels like her mother could be somebody different, whereas her father is stuck as this person because he's the alcoholic. I think that dynamic also continues throughout their relationship. Brittany loves performing from a young age. She's seen as talented from very early on, and her mom starts taking her on auditions and looking for ways to get her daughter out there from a very early age. She applies for a show called the Mickey Mouse Club that was very popular with kids at that time. It was a kind of variety show for very young kids, and some of the biggest names that we would end up growing up with in the late 90s, early 2000s came from that cast of kids, from Kerry Russell to Jay-Z, Chazé, Ryan Gosling. Who am I forgetting? Justin Timberlake. And that's actually where they meet. Her first go round, I think she's like 8. She's very young and she doesn't make it. But she has talent. She has very clear talent. And the casting director, I believe, gives her mom some advice, tells her, take her up to New York, get her on Broadway and doing jobs up there. And once she has some more experience and she's gotten older, you can re-audition, which they do. She performs on Star Search. She won her first round. She, I believe, loses her second round. She performs in different jobs and roles. When she goes to New York, it goes well for her, even though she gets tired of it and she kind of just wants to go back to school and she wants to go back home. She does well up there. Her and her mom come back down, re-audition for the Mickey Mouse Club, and she gets it.
I've always wanted to entertain, and so I went to New York City and I auditioned and I got it.
For a few years there, she's working full-time schedule, They do school at the taping place. She ends up in the life of a child actor and child performer, and they sing and dance and work all day long, but she's there with this group of kids that she really likes. This is kind of where the first glimmers of her and Justin Timberlake liking each other happen, and it seems to have been a nice interlude for her for the period of time that she was there, other than the fact that she's kind of tired of it by the end. It's a lot of work, and she kind of just wants to go be a regular girl at home and go to school and be with her friends. Britney is a bit of a troublemaker, I guess you could say. Her mom starts drinking with her at a young age. I will say though, for some people that may be more startling than for others, especially if you grew up in the South. Certain ideas of when children mature and become responsible or become capable of participating in certain adult activities is very different. It wasn't uncommon for kids to be smoking. It wasn't uncommon for kids to be drinking with their parents or at family functions. It wasn't uncommon for your parents to let you drive the car when you were 13 years old, 14 years old. There were different times, folks. There's a bit of that. But there's also, again, Southern life, you're in the middle of nowhere somewhere, like who's watching, who cares? Obviously not the best to be drinking daiquiris with your teenage daughter. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe you think that that's a great way to forge a relationship. Whatever your opinion, that's what was going on. And Britney had her little boyfriend and was living her little teenage girl life. But she loved performing. She loved being a performer. And so at some point, she really wants to get back into singing and wants to release her own album. Once she makes that decision, it seems to be a pretty quick run from the life that she's living to making it in front of Clive Davis and auditioning and ending up with her first album. Hit Me Baby One More Time, or Baby One More Time. What's the name of the album? Yeah, it's Baby One More Time in 1999. She releases the album, a music video that is a young girl kind of in a school uniform that's been made a bit more saucy, and it's just shot in different areas of what might be a school, like the gymnasium, the classroom, and it's an immediate hit. Everybody falls in love with, I believe, the 16-year-old Britney at that point once it's released. No, she's actually 17. So she's 17 when it's released, 17 going on 18, kind of in that gray period of minor to a legal young woman. And you see immediately a lot of the blending or blurring of that line with the public, with people who are working on her projects, whether it is the cover of Rolling Stone and she kind of is still a little girl, she's kind of a sexy woman, and the making of that video, Baby One More Time, where it's very burgeoning womanhood, but still an innocence there that a lot of people find appealing or attractive, especially during that time. It was all over the place. It was Alicia Silverstone's and the Liv Tyler's and all of the Aerosmith music videos. Half of the leading ladies in movies were either underage or just coming out of being underage. You had the Natalie Portmans, you had Claire Danes, you had the male figures in those movies who were also very young, but in retrospect, when you actually go back and see, they look very young. I mean, they're still relatively young, but the girls are so young. Winona Ryder is, just getting over to legality, and Johnny Depp is 10 years older than her, whatever their age gap was. So this messaging of young girl, older man is definitely in there. You also have a bit of, again, societally, we are eating it up. We're attracted to this idea, especially teenage girls who relate to all the feelings, right? You're still innocent, but you're ready to jump in a car and go cross country. You're ready to get wild, but you're scared of it. But you want to dance with your friends and you want to be risky, but you still want to be safe, right? You want to do it in school where it's safe. It's just such this push-pull of that time in a young girl's life that period of art really tapped into and amplified and exploited. There were just so many. There's always young women on the art scene and the music or movie scene, but especially at that time, some of the really biggest names were very young women. The Aaliyahs, the TLCs, again, the Christina Aguilera. She starts coming up with Britney at that time. She comes out not long after. You end up with Jessica Simpson. There's a whole Mandy Moore. This is along with the boy bands, this is a whole moment that we all live through. So she goes on this roller coaster ride. She is hitting it out of the park with her first album. She releases Oops, I Did It Again. She has wild success with that. She's dating Justin Timberlake. He's the head of NSYNC, or the lead singer of NSYNC, and they're both gorgeous, and the world is now in love with them, or the idea of them, and they're on this roller coaster ride. They had a tour together at some point early on that was huge, and as Britney's moving into this world of adulthood, people start treating her like she's an adult while judging her like she's still a child. So there's a lot of weird interviews asking her about her sexuality, her virginity. Is she gonna wait till she's married? Like all of these strange questions that I guess they feel entitled to ask because she is a woman.
You are fairly famous for, you've created this look and you have a bare midriff a lot when you're performing. You say that's a Southern thing. Is that right?
Yeah, well, seriously, it's so hot down south. Like when we go to dance rehearsals, I mean, yeah, everyone just wore sports bras.
But she has to pretend like she's still virginal and pure and going to stay that way until the prescribed moment where society says that she can unflower herself or be deflowered, like she's still a minor or a being that is not really allowed to be sexual and not allowed to stand in her own sexuality.
Had you ever kissed a woman before?
No, I've never kissed a woman before.
Would you again?
Would I again? No, I would not do it. Oh, maybe with Madonna, but
But that's it. You're going to stay true to Madonna as far as
yeah,
kissing?
Madonna. Yeah.
What does your mom think?
She actually lost her virginity before she met Justin, before this entire thing, but she was told, like a lot of the girls who were out at that time, she was told to portray a certain image, and virginity and purity was a part of that image. Why anybody felt like that was information that anybody was entitled to is wild, but that was normal at that time, or normalized at that time, and it was a part of big network interviews with her all the time.
You also talked for the first time this past year about your first time.
Older guys like asking these questions or making certain allusions or making certain jokes that were just so creepy.
She seemed very young. She seemed younger than a person who would bear her midriff. I mean, the impression I came away with was that it would be wrong to have adult thoughts about Britney Spears. I mean, she may be 21, but she seems, again, young, in a nice way.
So at this point, the major players in her life seem to be her and Justin. Her parents are kind of there, but they're really more back home. She's living her own life in her own home. She has this life with Justin. She's fairly independent, very successful, in charge of her life. She obviously has crews of people who answer to her creatively. The Baby One More Time video, it was her idea to do it in a school setting, like with her friends. She is involved in the machine that is her. She's not just this puppet that everybody's taking care of. She goes through the relationship with Justin. In the book, her past with Justin feels very present to her, or at least the pain of how certain things happened feel like they still are relevant to her in a big way. She had gotten pregnant at a certain point, which was a huge bombshell that she revealed with the story. And Justin absolutely did not want to have any kids. They were both super young. He felt like it would derail his career. She loved him and wanted what he wanted. And so she has an at-home abortion, which felt very scary to her. She wanted to go to a facility. We know today that that's something that's available to a lot of women. Doctors prescribe a pill instead of going to have a procedure. I don't know if it's the same pill. I don't know if it's as safe. I do know that she said that she was very scared and in pain. I felt very alone and vulnerable throughout that process, even though Justin was there with her. So, cut to things not working out with Justin. She is under the assumption that he wants to be out and free. She makes allusions to him having cheated on her through the years. She says that she doesn't care. She's, they're young and she's fine with ignoring it as long as it's not anything too blatant. But she gets the feeling as he's distancing himself that he just wants to be done with the relationship, and he manufactures her having had this big affair and that being the reason why they're separating. He writes her some long letter. It just seems like very dramatic and childish, which they were both childish, so it's not, they were both very young, so it's not surprising. But what's weird about it is that even though she had been, according to her, even though she had been involved with somebody else who was her choreographer at the time, she says that Justin knew about this, and the fact that they both knew that things weren't perfect between them, like he was fine with it and it had happened in the past, and she didn't actually sleep with this guy. She says that it was just a kiss and that she had immediately told Justin. Since she wrote the memoir, there are some people who've said that they don't believe that because she wrote Wade a 14-page letter saying that things weren't working out and ending it. And why would you write a 14-page letter to somebody who you just kissed? Also, they were all friends at that time, and Wade was a choreographer for NSYNC, so it's a bit more messy, they're trying to say, than how Britney made it seem in the memoir. But the long story short is, she says he was doing things, and the fact that, and we were fine after I told him whatever it was that she did, and the fact that he would then later, after they broke up, just because it was time to break up, he would later propagandize this thing that had happened and turn her into the bad guy, the one who had cheated on him. If you saw his first video, Cry Me a River, after he went solo, the female in the video, who the song is about, a woman who cheats on him and then repents of it, and he's basically saying, I don't care at this point, cry me a river so you have no tears left, I'm never coming back. That woman, you never see her face, and her silhouette and her physique and her hair color and all of that are very reminiscent of a blonde young woman who he had been dating prior, which I mean Britney Spears, if you didn't get that. Between the whole abortion thing and how that kind of played out, it kind of puts Justin in not the most flattering light. She also makes fun of him a little bit about how he was really into hip hop and wanted to be seen as being one of the cool hip hop guys. And I guess whenever he would see, or she has an example of him seeing somebody who was famous, she has him sing, I think, Genuine, and he does this overblown, yo, 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 whatever he says to him, that her and her girlfriend, her assistant, make fun of him afterwards. She basically paints him as this kind of corny character, but she loves him anyway. He's a tryhard, and he's, the member of a boy band, but he's her boyfriend. She loves him. So she's distraught, heartbroken for a long time after that. And she tries to go out and just be a carefree young woman, but she's under a big microscope. Everybody's paying attention to every single thing that she does. Eventually, we come to meet Mr. Federline, who was a salacious young man at that time because he was expecting a baby from his longtime girlfriend who he had another child with, Shar Jackson, who was an actress on Moesha. If you were in anywhere in the world at that time, Brandy was the lead of Moesha. It was a huge TV show, and it was, again, a part of the pop culture moment. So this guy who nobody had heard of, who was a background dancer, who all of a sudden is being seen with Britney everywhere, has this whole other life that he had going on. According to Britney, she didn't know anything about it until she starts dating him openly, and she finds out, you have kids, you have a baby coming. She doesn't leave him though. She loves him. She stays with him. She ends up marrying him and having 2 kids with him. She says that a lot of what happened during that time, and a lot of how vulnerable she was, and a lot of the circumstance that she participated in, was a continuation of her not having healed from the Justin situation. And then she gets into the situation with Kevin, where she loves him a lot and she thinks that they're going to be a happy family, which is, at heart, she is this hometown girl who wants to be mom and dad and kids and raise a family and just be happy together and have a simpler life. She has a lot of trouble with the paparazzi and the exposure and not being able to be just her genuine self in the world, which a lot of famous people deal with, right? The price of fame. But she enters into this relationship with Kevin, and as soon as they've got the family and they have the one baby and she's immediately got the second baby on the way, he starts, again, according to her, he starts going into Kevin Federline, the burgeoning rapper. He is out partying, he is out recording music all the time, he's out recording videos all the time, and she feels very neglected and mistreated. This is a bit of the beginning of where we start to see Britney Spears as the pop star who is being treated or mistreated as if she is just another powerless young woman. She shows up to wherever he's recording and he's in there partying and having a good time with his people, and the security won't let her in. That they've been told that she's not allowed to go in. She's sitting there staring from some window, climbing on something to see inside this building. It's very startling to read how quickly her power gets stripped of her when all of the money and everything that's being used to operate all of that is hers. And whether she's ceded that power or whether it was taken from her, she says, like, these are my security. These are people I hired. How are these people being used against me now? And again, a foreshadowing of what's going to come later. They end up getting divorced. Surprise, surprise. Again, she goes back to, I still haven't healed from Justin. I am still trying to get my life together. I have these 2 babies back to back. I am struggling with postpartum depression, undiagnosed. Nobody's addressing it at the time. And then she has this horrible situation with her husband. Her family falls apart and she enters into custody battles with him. People in the street at that time thought that Federline had manufactured that situation from day one. He releases some song. It's horrible. It's ridiculous. He's a caricature. Nobody likes him. They had done, I think when she was pregnant with her first baby, they had done some interview together trying to, I feel like, or was felt like at that time, trying to show them as a happy couple and he's this good guy. And everybody looked at him as an opportunist from day one. They already judged him for what he was doing to Shar. And she had said somewhere in that timeline, like she thought they were fine. She was surprised when he turns up with Britney. Everybody looked at it like it was a calculated move. When his music career flops and he divorces her and tries to take custody of the kids, everybody's opinion is he's doing it for the money. It's the only way he can keep her money. It's the only way he can keep getting money from her. Obviously, what does he have to fall back on? They enter into this back and forth. By this point, Britney is 26 years old. She's 26 years old and she's a dumbass because she's 26 years old. In that time, she had that hugely public relationship with Justin. When that falls apart, she loses her mind a little bit, is all over the place. She actually, I think, married a childhood sweetheart for like less than 24 hours in Vegas. She gets with Kevin, who's a mess. They have the 2 kids. They're only together a few years. She gets divorced. The whole world is judging everything that she does. It's only months after the divorce that he ends up with sole custody of the boys. She ends up fighting over years to try to get custody back of them. She is struggling. She's struggling emotionally. She's struggling mentally. She tries to go out with friends. Those were the famous pictures with Paris and Lindsay Lohan. Tabloids villainize her for being outside. Tabloids villainize her for dating somebody. Tabloids villainize her for being anywhere without her kids. Tabloids villainize her for being with her kids when she is with them, for the ways that she is with them. She is just, because she is not quiet and dealing with life in a calm and boring manner, she is painted as completely mentally unstable. Again, she's still dealing with postpartum depression. She had just had her second baby. And at a certain point, she gets into a altercation with Federline where she doesn't want to give the boys up. There are stories about what actually happened, but either way, she closes herself off in the house and doesn't want to give the boys up. During all of this is when her father steps into the storyline in a formal way, and after a series of events between rehab, the kids, everything going on, he ends up being designated as her conservator. Her control over her life is taken away from her. Her father is named as her conservator. At the time, it's explained to her that this is what's going to be the easiest way for her to get her boys back. Her father's going to be a temporary conservator. She's going to get her life together and she's going to get her boys back. As we all know, the conservatorship went on for over a decade after that. So the intent, if that was actually the intent to begin with, gets lost somewhere. She ends up struggling for many, many years because her father and the whole establishment that is brought in to control her, which a conservatorship in California is meant for somebody who can either not clothe or shelter themselves. This is a woman who was on world tours at the time, who was basically clothing and sheltering teams of people and their families based off of the work that came from her person. So how they even got to the point where this was even allowed is wild. She says it briefly in the book, or she says it a few times, but she doesn't go into depth of the idea. But she's like, there were so many guys that I knew in the industry who were a mess, who were doing drugs, who were breaking things. Think about the rock and roll guys. Think about just the guys in the town, the different women they were with, the drinking, the drugs, all of it. But she is painted as if she's some inept who needs to be babied. And it goes back again to her family's history of institutionalizing women. It also goes back to society as a whole wanting to infantilize young women. You're not old enough to take care of yourself. You are old enough to be half naked on TV. You are old enough for us to exploit and make millions of dollars off of. But you're absolutely not old enough or capable enough of taking care of yourself, of making your own decisions. Throughout the conservatorship, she has all of this pain of dealing with people mistreating her. You have the people around her who she's paying for who end up treating her like garbage because she's powerless at this point. And this is a theme that you've seen before, where people like to exploit the powerful when they're not in a position of power. It's kind of like a getting back at them. This often happens with weak people, but you see it in all kinds of abuses. You see it in abuses of the elderly. You see it in abuses of children. You see it where somebody is sick or incapacitated. Now you can treat them how they deserve. It's obviously heartbreaking. Britney doesn't deserve any of that. She is not allowed to make any decisions that she should have been able to make. Her father was supposed to be a kind of manager of her life so that she could get back on track and be able to be a participating parent in her kids' lives, to run her businesses. And instead, year after year, he and the team around him, who were all profiting off of her, made it seem as if the best thing for her was for them to be in place. They used the proof that look at everything she's doing, look at the Vegas residencies, look how much money she's making, look how she's thriving, look how good she's doing, because we're forcing her to do all this work. But the measure of good is how much money she's making. Talking nothing about her mental well-being, talking nothing about her emotional well-being, talking nothing about her happiness in life, which she verbalizes over and over again through the years. The conservatorship ends up finally being ended in 2021. This was after the Free Britney movement, where fans and activists had come together and protested over years. They had online campaigns saying that Britney was being held against her will. There would just be little things that would come out that would give people the idea that she wasn't free, that she didn't want to be in the conservatorship, that she wanted to live her life on her own. And she wasn't being vocal about that, because she says at a certain point, she was raised to call people to say yes sir and no sir. She was raised as a young Southern woman who did as she was told, and there's a lot of fear that was engendered in her. And it's honestly really sad that she was abused and manipulated in that way for so long. But thankfully, after some abuse allegations came out, and after some fact finding, and after the judge is a different judge, that's crazy, because some of the transcripts from between the judge and the court-appointed attorney that were supposed to be representing her throughout that conservatorship, some of the conversations were wild. They were mocking her. They were, at a certain point, the judge is interested in how much she's making off of her residency tour. When the attorney's trying to talk to her about Britney saying that she wants to be out of the conservatorship and feels like she's being exploited, that her father's a drunk, and she wants random alcohol testing. And the judge says something to the effect of, like, who does she think she is to be be asking for that. Crazy. Finally, that judge is gone. Who knows if he was being paid? Who knows what was happening? But that judge is gone. 2 judges later, I believe. Finally, that judge lets her go. And her main impetus at that point is to want to, again, live a simple life. She wants to marry the man that she loves. She wants to have a family. She's engaged at the time to Sam Asghari, and they do end up getting married. Doesn't work out, but they seem to have split amicably. And if he was the catalyst for her finding the courage and the strength to get out of that situation and empower herself, then it was all worth it. They weren't married for very long, but they were in about a 7-year relationship. So it was something substantial, and clearly he cared about her for a really long time. Her kids are grown now. She still wishes she was closer to them. It feels like she's still trying to recover some of what was lost. And that's just so hard when so much time and distance has gone by. But I hope that as she's free and able to make mistakes like a regular human being and get it right and get it wrong and just live, that she gets some of that normalcy back and it covers all of the aspects of her life. Subscribe, 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 subscribe. And she's out at clubs all night. She's raving. This is during the 90s where raves were huge, and those clubs are going until 8 a.m. and everybody's all night long.